Somewhere in you, a life is being lived that isn't yours. Not a metaphor, not a mood. A second life, running underneath your own. And you are its landlord, collecting nothing, paying everything. Look at the shape of your choices, the career you chose, the partner you chose, the way you flinch before you speak, the way you apologize before you're finished existing in a room. Did you choose the flinch? Nobody chooses a flinch. A flinch is inherited. Here is the wound. Plainly, you were born into a house you did not build. The walls were up before you arrived. The furniture was already arranged. Your mother's disappointed ambitions in the East Wing. Your father's swallowed rage in the cellar. A grandfather's shame bricked into the foundation so deep, nobody remembers laying it. You didn't decorate this house. You inherited it, fully furnished, and you have spent your entire life mistaking the furniture for yourself. You call it who I am. It is not who you are. It is who you were assigned. Picture the scene, because you've lived it more than once. A man sits in a meeting. An idea rises in his throat, sharp, correct, worth saying. He swallows it before it reaches his mouth. He tells himself he's being cautious, professional, appropriately quiet. He is not being cautious. He is 9 years old again at a dinner table, having already learned that opinions cost more than they're worth. Think about the moment you picked your profession. Was there a voice, quiet, almost bored, the way old instructions sound, telling you what was sensible, what was safe, what would finally make someone's face soften with approval? Whose face? Not yours. You've never once needed your own approval. You already had it. You were chasing someone else's. A man becomes an accountant because his father spent 40 years quietly grieving the novel he never wrote and could not bear to watch his own son risk that same devastation. The son never wanted numbers. He wanted stories. He simply never noticed the substitution happen. It happened too early, before he owned a self capable of objecting. A woman spends 30 years becoming a surgeon because her mother wanted, more than anything, to become a doctor and never could. The daughter succeeds. The mother beams. And the daughter, brilliant, competent, utterly hollow, feels nothing at the ceremony but a strange, cold vacancy, as if she'd handed in someone else's exam and gotten someone else's grade. She is not crazy. She is not ungrateful. She is haunted. This is the part no one prepares you for. The people who raised you were not finished. Every unlived ambition, every swallowed desire, every door they were too afraid to open, it didn't disappear when they closed it. It went looking for a body. It found yours. You were not just loved. You were used, not out of cruelty, but out of desperation, the desperation of unlived lives, searching for a vessel young enough to still carry them forward. And here is the part that should stop you cold. You don't even experience it as being used. You experience it as wanting things. Your own ambition feels like your own ambition. Your own fear feels like your own fear. That is the trap's real cruelty. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like you. So ask yourself, right now, before you go any further, when you imagine your ideal life, the version of you that finally made it, whose face is watching you succeed? If someone else's face appeared in your mind just now, you already know. Don't look away from that yet. Sit in it. That flicker of recognition is the first honest thing you've felt about your own life in years. You are not living. You are hosting. If these words carved an echo within your void, do not turn back. The descent has just begun. Click below, subscribe, and claim your reality. Carl Jung had a dream once. that never let go of him. He was walking through a house, his own house, he assumed, and descended a staircase to find a floor he didn't recognize. Older, darker, furnished in a style from centuries past. He kept descending. Beneath that floor, a cellar from Roman times. Beneath that, a cave, untouched, prehistoric, holding bones and broken pottery no living memory could explain. Notice what he didn't do. He didn't wake up and dismiss it as noise, the way you dismiss most dreams before coffee. He treated it as information, as a diagram of the psyche itself, handed to him by the one part of him that never lies, because it doesn't know how to perform for an audience. That dream became one of the spines of his entire psychology. The house is not one floor. You are not one floor. You are the whole structure, top to bottom, and you have been living your entire life on the ground floor, mistaking the entrance hall for the whole building. Jung called that ground floor the persona. It's not fake, exactly. It's real, but partial. It's the face you show the street. The problem isn't that you have a persona. Everyone needs one. You can't walk around with your whole psyche exposed. The problem is, when you forget you're wearing it, when you start believing the entrance hall is the entire house, and never go looking for the stairs. You've watched this happen to yourself, a death in the family, and instead of grieving, you find yourself managing everyone else's comfort, refilling glasses, answering condolence texts, holding the room together with a composure that isn't composure at all. It's the entrance hall performing its function even while the rest of the house is on fire. So where did the rest of the house come from? This is where Jung makes his most dangerous claim. The unlived life of the parent becomes the fate of the child. Not a curse, a mechanism. A father who buried his own creative hunger to become a reliable provider does not simply keep that hunger to himself. It leaks. It shows up in the son as a strange, disproportionate pressure to be practical, to be safe, to never risk what the father never let himself risk. The son thinks this pressure is wisdom. It's grief wearing a disguise. A mother who abandoned her own voice to keep a marriage peaceful raises a daughter who cannot say no without her stomach turning. The daughter isn't weak. She is fluent in a language she never agreed to learn, the language of someone else's silence. Jung had a name for these installed, autonomous fragments, complexes, not issues, not baggage. Complexes behave like separate personalities living inside the one personality you call yourself. Clusters of memory and emotion so charged, they can seize the wheel entirely. You felt this. You said something wildly disproportionate to a small comment, and thought afterward, that wasn't me. You were right. It wasn't. A complex answered the phone before you could. Watch a woman collapse into apology the instant someone's voice rises even slightly at dinner. Not because the moment calls for it, but because a complex built at 8 years old. Watching a father's temper fill a kitchen is still calibrating every raised voice as danger requiring instant surrender. She isn't overreacting to the dinner. She's reacting exactly on schedule to the kitchen. And beneath even the complexes, beneath your personal history, your particular parents, your particular wounds, Jung found something stranger still, the collective unconscious. Patterns older than your family, older than language. The same figures appearing in dreams across cultures that never met. The tyrant, the wise old man, the devouring mother, the hero who must leave home to become himself. Jung called these recurring shapes archetypes. You didn't learn them. You were built with them, the way a bird is built with the shape of a nest it has never seen. This is why a myth from a culture you've never studied can still land in your chest like a memory. You're not recognizing a story. You're recognizing furniture that was already in the house when you moved in. This is why the trap runs so deep. It isn't only your mother's disappointment sitting in your chest. It's every mother's disappointment echoing backward through the species, using your particular life as its newest microphone. So when you ask, why can't I want what I actually want? You're not asking a small question. You're asking about the entire architecture beneath your feet. Floor under floor under floor, down to a cave you've never visited and can't remember building. And the horrifying, electrifying truth Jung leaves you with is this: most people die without ever finding the staircase. Here is the assumption you walked in with, and it has to die, that somewhere beneath all this conditioning, there is a pure, authentic you, untouched, uncorrupted, simply waiting to be uncovered, like a statue under old paint. There isn't. Jung never promised you a hidden true self sitting patiently in the basement, waiting for you to scrape the persona off and finally meet the real thing. That fantasy is comforting precisely because it's passive. It means somewhere, a finished version of you already exists, and your only job is excavation. Dig enough, and you'll find yourself intact. But the psyche isn't a ruin to be excavated. It's a structure still being built. And you are not merely its occupant. You are, whether you've noticed or not, its only living architect. This is the fantasy sold to you constantly in 100 glossy forms. Quit the job, leave the city, sit on the right cushion long enough, and the real you will finally step out from behind the fake one, fully formed, grateful to be released. Watch what actually happens to the people who try it. They quit the job. They leave the city. They sit on the cushion. And underneath the persona they've spent years dismantling, they don't find a person. They find another wall, and behind that wall another, because the house doesn't have a hidden ground floor. It has floors, all the way down, and every one of them is real. This is the deeper cut. There is no rescue coming from inside you, because inside you is not a finished place. Go back to the house. Remember the cave at the bottom, the bones, the broken pottery from an age no one alive remembers. Notice what Jung did not find down there, a name tag. No note that reads, "This is the real you, hidden safely below the fake ones." The deepest floor is not more you than the top floor. It's more ancient. Ancientness is not the same as authenticity. Sit with what that means. If there's no pure self waiting underneath, then the version of you shaped by your mother's unlived ambition, and the version of you that might have existed without her wound, are not false self versus true self. They are simply two different constructions, one built for you without your consent, in the dark. The other, possibly, built by you, in the light, on purpose. The trap was never that someone else's life got inside yours. The trap is believing that removing it would leave something whole behind. It wouldn't. It would leave a hole. And a hole is not a self. A hole is just an invitation for the next unlived life to move in. This is why so many people who leave the marriage, quit the job, cut off the parent, and still feel empty. They evicted a tenant and called it freedom. But an empty house isn't a home. It's just vacancy, waiting for the next ghost with a key. Here, finally, is where the metaphor turns from wound into weapon. You were never meant to find the house finished. You were meant to become its builder. Individuation, Jung's word for the whole terrifying lifelong process, is not the discovery of who you secretly are. It is the construction of who you are, floor by floor, using the old materials because they're the only materials you have, but arranging them, finally, by your own hand. Picture the accountant from part 1, 40 years old, finally admitting the numbers were never his. If the trap were simply someone else's life got in, the fix would be subtraction. Remove the father's grief, and a novelist steps out fully formed, but that isn't what he finds when he tries. He finds a blank page and no instinct for how to fill it, because no one ever let him practice wanting anything of his own. The relief doesn't come from discovering he was secretly a writer all along. It comes from realizing he gets to decide, badly at first, one page at a time, without asking permission from a ghost. And here is the visceral part, the part that should move through your chest like a held breath finally let go. The moment you stop searching for the real you, hiding somewhere beneath the wreckage, and start laying one brick, on purpose, with your own hands. Something in you exhales for the first time since childhood, not because you found yourself, because you stopped waiting to be found and started building instead. You are not a ruin to be excavated. You are a house under construction, and the blueprints were never going to be handed to you. You have to draw them while living inside the walls. Weapon 1. The confession to the seller. Picture the moment you're lying awake at 2 a.m. and a thought arrives that you would never say out loud, a flash of contempt for someone you love, a wish for a life that would devastate the people counting on you, a satisfaction at another person's failure. You flinch, bury it, tell yourself that's not who I am. It is exactly who you are. It's the part of you Jung called the shadow, everything you had to disown to keep the persona clean enough to wear in public. And here's the cost of hiding it. What you refuse to see in yourself, you will meet in others, dressed as their fault. The colleague who always irritates you, the trait you can't stand in your sibling. Check first whether you're looking in a mirror mounted on someone else's face. The tool is brutal in its simplicity. Once a week, write down one thought, urge or impulse you were ashamed of and did not act on, not to punish yourself. To own it. Ownership is the opposite of possession. What you own cannot secretly run you. Weapon 2. The complex alarm. Name it the instant it happens. A complex just answered for me. You know the feeling, the wildly oversized reaction, the words that came out sharper and older than the situation deserved, as if a much younger version of you had grabbed the microphone. That's not an exaggeration. That's a complex. And the cost of this tool is humiliating. You have to admit, in the moment, mid-outburst, that you are not fully in command of yourself, that something autonomous just drove your body for 30 seconds while you watched from the passenger seat. Most people never build this alarm because it requires interrupting your own certainty while you're still furious. Do it anyway. The instant the reaction is disproportionate to the trigger, say to yourself silently, "This is bigger than this moment. Whose voice is this?" The complex loses power the second you can name it as separate from you. Naming is the first act of the architect, not the ghost. Keep a private tally if you have to. Every time the alarm fires and you catch it before it finishes wrecking the room, write down what triggered it and how old the reaction felt. Patterns will surface within weeks. The same age, the same accusation, the same kitchen, over and over. That repetition is the complex's signature. Once you can recognize the signature, it can no longer operate in disguise. Weapon 3. The dialogue at the door. Jung did something most of his contemporaries thought was mad. He sat deliberately and had conversations with the figures in his own psyche, imagined them, let them speak back, argued with them, listened. He called it active imagination. It sounds like fiction. It behaves like surgery. Try it on the ghost that runs your ambition. Picture your parent, not as they are to you now, but as they were before you existed, young, wanting something specific and enormous, before life narrowed them down. Ask them, directly, in your imagination, what did you want before me? Let them answer. Often the answer will land like a small earthquake. You'll realize the exact shape of your own purpose is a photocopy of a life they never got to live. Then say the sentence that breaks the transmission. That was your unlived life. It is not mine to finish. You are not rejecting them. You are returning something that was never actually yours to carry. Do this at the door, in your imagination, before you ever attempt it out loud in the kitchen. The imagined conversation is the rehearsal. The real one, someday, is the performance. Weapon 4, the unbuilt room. This is the one with teeth. Find the door in your own house you have never opened. The desire so old and so suppressed, you've stopped even registering it as a desire. The instrument you never played. The subject you never studied. The way of living you dismissed before you ever tried it, because a voice that wasn't yours called it foolish, or beneath you, or impossible for someone responsible. Open it, not as a hobby, as evidence. Every unbuilt room you finally construct, deliberately, on purpose, for no one's approval, proves the house has an architect now, and it's you. This is uncomfortable in a way the others aren't, because it demands time, money, humiliation, the risk of being bad at something in front of witnesses. Do it regardless. An unlived life left unbuilt in you will not stay quietly unbuilt. It will wait for a child of your own. Nobody hands you permission for this one. Nobody applauds a grown man taking his first painting class. Badly. That silence is the price of the room. Pay it. Return, one more time, to the wound. Somewhere in you, a life is being lived that isn't yours. It is still true. It will likely always be partly true. No one fully finishes building a house, and Jung never pretended individuation ends. But something has shifted in how that sentence lands. It used to sound like a life sentence. Now it sounds like a job description. A life sentence has no exit and no author but the judge. A job description has tasks, and tasks can be done. That is the entire distance you've traveled, not from haunted to healed, but from prisoner to tradesman. The ghosts didn't leave. You just stopped mistaking their voices for your own and started clocking in to a different job. The slow, unglamorous, lifelong work of building the rooms nobody built for you. Picture her, the surgeon from part 1, 30 years into a career that was never hers to choose. Picture the phone ringing. Her mother, as always, asking about the next promotion, the next milestone, the next thing to be proud of on her behalf. And picture the old script, the daughter's mouth opening to deliver the update her mother needs to feel her own unlived life was worth it. Now picture the new floor she's built beneath that old habit. She lets the silence sit for one extra second. She says, instead, I'm actually thinking about leaving the hospital. I want to paint, not defiantly, not as rebellion, as a fact, delivered by someone who finally lives in her own house and no longer feels obligated to keep the lights on for a tenant who moved in before she was born. The mother goes quiet, grief maybe, or recognition, the particular ache of watching your child do the thing you never let yourself do. Either way, the daughter doesn't reach to fix the silence. She lets it be someone else's floor to build. That is the whole shape of the way through, not a dramatic exile from your family, your history, your ghosts. Just one moment, repeated, where the old blueprint says comply, and you draw a different line instead. No lightning strikes, no orchestra swells. The house doesn't announce that it has a new architect. It simply, quietly, stops being run by the dead. The house was never haunted because it was cursed. It was haunted because no one was living in it on purpose. Every unlived ambition, every swallowed complex, every ancestor's silence. They weren't malicious. They were simply unattended rooms, and unattended rooms fill themselves with whatever is left over from other lives. The moment you walk your own halls deliberately, naming what's in the cellar, catching the complex before it answers for you, sending the old ghosts back to where they belong, opening the doors you were told to leave shut, the haunting doesn't end. It graduates. It becomes architecture. Yours, your children, if you have them, will inherit this house eventually, the way you inherited it. That is not something you can prevent. It is the only thing you can improve. Every room you build on purpose, in your own lifetime, is one less room your children will have to build for you after you're gone. You will not wake up one day fully built. That was never the offer. The offer was smaller and stranger, and in the end, far more livable. Stop waiting to discover the finished house and pick up the tools. You were never the ghost. You were always meant to be the architect. So, whose unlived life have you been finishing? And what's the first room you're finally going to build for yourself?